What's up, No Nation? Welcome to another episode of Plant the Spear podcast. Excited to be back with you guys. We got actual football to talk about as the season is right around the corner. So we are excited to get into some offensive talk today. Michael, we also got some preseason polls coming out. You know, preseason rankings don't really mean anything, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about them a little bit.
Right.
And then it's your day, buddy. Paul Finebaum, Mr. Burns looking self. We are coming for you. I was going to let it go, but you talked about my team. And so you got it coming. So the very first segment of PTS, which stands for Pardon the Slander, or also Plant the Spear, will be debuted on today's show. So excited to get into it. It's going to be a fun one today. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. Before we jump into that, Michael, how are you, my friend? Are you ready for this one? This is going to be a fun one, I feel like.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. This is going to be a fun one. We're going to talk about football, but yeah, we got to deal with some stuff today.
We got some beef we got to unload here.
Beef. My man over here trying to talk some stuff about my boys, my team, and we can't just let that fly. So we going to talk football, but we going to have a come to Jesus moment with Paul Finebaum.
That's right. So, man, I'm excited, right? The season is right around the corner. Like you said, we are going to talk about football today. And, you know, if you're a Seminole booster and a season ticket holder, then you got probably the same email we did yesterday. Season tickets are here.
They're here
in our possession. So that means football is right around the corner. So, man, it's just this is the time of the year that you look forward to. I know it's still late August. We didn't even make it to September for our first game, but man, just so many awesome memories when you think about Florida State in the fall and what football season means to ourselves as well as a lot of the fan base. This is where you reconnect with friends and family. And, you know, some of my favorite memories are going out to the national championship in 2014. That was one of the coolest trips I've ever taken. Got to see us win a national title in the Rose Bowl. Of course, man, I got to say last year, New Orleans or the year before last, New Orleans was up there, man. That was a pretty fun year, pretty fun trip down to New Orleans where Seminole fans took over. So, man, you never know what this season is going to produce. I know a lot of our fan base is going to Dublin for that first game.
Yep.
Wish I could be there with you guys. We'll be here live afterwards if you can catch us from there. But it's going to be, man, that's going to be a fun experience. So give me a couple of your favorite memories from your fandom over the years.
Oh, man. I mean, gosh, I just think about, obviously, I live here in Orlando. So last year, you know, first game, super nervous, couldn't eat all day, couldn't sleep the night before. That's how I always feel before games. And just going into that stadium, I sat next to a couple of LSU fans. And, you know, they were talking the ish. They were all talking the ish. And, you know, by the third quarter, oh, man.
They were looking for the car in the parking lot.
That's right. It was so good. Obviously, I lived in California in 2013 and got to go set up in the scoreboard at the Rose Bowl there and watched Florida State win that title. I cried like a baby. I'm not going to lie. Gosh, I remember when we finally beat Miami after a long, 7 straight losses. When they won at Doak Campbell. What a game. It was like 10-7, but we finally did it. It was so great.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, so many opening just season memories and stuff. I was at the Alabama versus Florida State game where DeAndre Frontstar got hurt.
That was a tough one.
Sat in a Waffle House and cried like a baby after that. Ups and downs. But you know what? I wouldn't trade it all. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I love it. I'm so grateful for Florida State football to be back. Can't wait to get into it.
I know. Same here, man. I think of the 2013 Miami game was just one of the craziest atmospheres I've ever been to. I've been to a walk-off field goal against Clemson. That was awesome. Hey, I was even swag surfing for Virginia Tech, looking like a dummy out there. But we had a great time until football had to be played.
Wait, Jesse, weren't you at the game that?
No, we're not going to talk. We're not
talking about that.
We're not going to talk about that. And I promise you, it ain't the Orange Bowl. It was much more painful than that. And I was row 1 behind that school's bench. So
gosh,
there are scars inside as well. Thank you, Florida State. But man, it's an awesome time. It's my favorite time of the year. I love the other day I was just daydreaming about being back in Tallahassee. We're hoping to have maybe some kind of tailgate this year at either the Clemson or the Florida game if you plan on being there for those. So lots of fun and exciting things for this season. And, man, we're just excited. You know, the other day I actually was getting some content ready for the site, and I started loading in the Georgia Tech preview into the queue there. And so, man, that means it is almost game week, and so I cannot wait to have actual football back in Doak Campbell State. Well, a little bit farther away for the first one, but then back in Doak Campbell Stadium this season. And speaking of, man, I want to take a quick second before we jump into this episode to just give a couple shout outs to the people who make this happen. All the people, every one of our supporters that have been here, from the day one to yesterday.
That's right.
You guys, as we get into another season, we wouldn't be where we're at if it wasn't for you guys. So I definitely want to thank you guys for tuning in. I want to give my guy Jermaine a shout out that I met at the Charlotte Seminole Club. Was a guy that reached out to me and said he's been a listener since day one. We got to hang out at that event. That was super cool. And then also, when we say that we're a family here at Plant the Spirit, it's no joke.
Yeah.
I recognize the names that we interact with. I recognize your usernames. If you stop commenting, I'll come find you and make sure everything's okay. Don't think I won't do it because I've done it before. But one of our own is going through a little bit of tribulation right now with a medical issue that he's facing. So I just want to give longtime listener Ed and his son Chuck a shout out to let you guys know that obviously we are keeping you in our thoughts and prayers during this time. And we know that you will rise up like the Seminoles will and beat them like Florida or Miami on any given year. So Ed, just letting you know, my friend, that our thoughts and prayers are with you, and you're going to get through this thing. I promise you, but we got your back here at Plant the Spear.
Yeah, Ed, man, just know, brother, we're thinking about you. We've been praying for you, been talking, even during the summer, we just lifting you up, brother, and just know, that unconquered Seminole spirit, man, lives in you, and we're with you along the way, brother.
Awesome, man. So to get into this, let's talk about a little bit of football here. And let's start with the preseason polls that have come out. Florida State is ranked number 10 in the AP poll and in the coaches poll. And so again, like we said in the opening, preseason polls, they don't really mean anything. I think usually sometimes the college football playoff poll, I like how it doesn't come, we don't like much about them, but I like how it doesn't come out till later in the season when you've had some teams play. But honestly, man, with the way college football is, you might have a few surprises here or there, but this is probably around what you're going to see in that first poll, give or take a few teams. And so I think it does give you an idea of where you stand coming into the season. And I'm not really surprised by any of the first five with Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, who may or may not have a running back coming into the season. So we'll see about that. Of course, we don't ever want anybody to get injured, and we're, holding our breath every day when Florida State has camp updates. So, I hate it for them, but they're moving wide receivers to running back right now. So that could be a struggle for them. Alabama at number 5, no surprise there. Ole Miss, a little bit surprising all the way up at number 6. I know that they've done a lot in the portal as well as Florida State, but they haven't really ever won much yet. So that one's a little interesting. Then you got Notre Dame, your first opponent that pops up in these rankings, number 7. And if they're a top 10 team when you meet, which we all kind of expect them to be, that's going to be a massive game. We already knew it was going to be big. Of course, you have Penn State at number 8, the perennial 10-2 team that will more than likely beat everybody but the good teams on their schedule. But that may get them into the playoffs this year. And then the real head scratcher for me is Michigan, coming in at number 9. Lost a lot of their team, lost their coaching staff. They're cheating and lost Connor Stallions and then the MVP of the team. They lost. That's worse than losing your quarterback. So
that's right.
And still number 9. It's really interesting to me. And then, of course, we said Florida State comes in at 10. I think that's a pretty fair spot for us. I don't really hate us being at number 10. I think that with all the question marks that you have coming back this year with losing a lot of your top producers, I didn't expect you to be anywhere in the top 5. Right. I would have probably been a little disappointed had you been outside of the top 15, just knowing that your blue chip ratio is higher. I think Mike Norvell has shown that he is one of the best coaches in the country. And then, just to touch on a couple other highlights, you have Clemson at 14. That is a team on your schedule. Miami at 19. Okay, good luck with that one. But hey, that's Miami tradition. Start high, finish low, and just see if you can't melt down in between there. Then you got Texas A&M at number 20. And that one will be interesting as well. I think they start with Notre Dame, I think.
Yes, they do. You're right.
So that'll be an interesting one there. And then, of course, you have number 24 NC State as an ACC team. So you have 3 opponents in the top 25. And I will say that what I do find interesting is when you look just past that to the others receiving votes, I think the schedule is a little harder than people are giving us credit for this year. SMU is right there. Memphis is right there. You have a couple of other teams. You have 4 opponents that fall between that 25 and 40. So 7 of your opponents are in the top 40 in the preseason ranking. So this schedule can be a little bit tricky. I mean, hey, it's nothing like Florida's that has 7 opponents in the top 25. So speaking of prayers up, Billy Napier, you're going to need him this season.
You're going to need him, brother.
So probably a pretty good place.
Hope you got your jorts packed.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have to follow along with the Jort report to see what's going on down there in Gainesville. So we're just having, hey guys, look, we're having some fun with today. Tomorrow's actually my birthday whenever you're watching this.
That's right.
It's my party. I can do what I want, right? So we're going to have some fun with it today. But yeah, man, I think 10's a pretty good place for us in the preseason rankings. So give me some thoughts on this. What are you thinking?
Yeah. Like I told you before, I think, Florida State coming in anywhere between 10 to 15, I think I would have been totally fine with, because, they have some question marks on the wide receiver position group. Obviously, with the offensive line, I mean, obviously the things that have coming out of camp is saying this is probably the best offensive line Mike Norvell has had it in his tenure at Florida State. So, but you still have questions. You haven't seen it yet. And then, of course, how DJU is going to transition. So it makes sense that they have them around 10. What doesn't make sense is the fact that Michigan, who their best player went into the transfer portal via being fired. He's gone. The coach is gone. He's no longer an honorary captain. Half their players are gone. And their offensive coordinator, who basically got the job because Jim Harbaugh, begged them to give him the job.
Yep.
Why are they 9th? Why are they above Florida State? I get that they won a national title last year, but they lost a lot.
Right.
And it just doesn't make much sense. I think the Ole Miss one's a little questionable, kind of makes you raise the eyebrow there. Penn State, until they prove they can beat somebody with a pulse, I'm never going to trust them. Never going to trust that they'll actually do anything significantly. I think, of course, Georgia honestly was probably the best team last season. Alabama got to them. I think Alabama currently is just getting this. They're still in the glow of the Nick Saban love. I think that's going to be, probably they're going to get that for at least the next couple of seasons until Kevin DeBoer can kind of show what he's all about. So, I don't know if they should be that high. I think they should be top 10. I don't know if they should be top 5. Texas, I think, is just because they're part of the SEC. I don't think they should be in the top 10 based on, they're basically calling the water boy to come run the ball for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the top 10 is, it's preseason.
Yeah, and they really don't matter. I mean, I can see Texas up there. They're pretty talented. The thing with Alabama, man, it's interesting. And I know this isn't an Alabama podcast, but man, Kalen DeBoer, I think he's like 104-12 as a head coach or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is I went to look this up. Of course, rosters change from one year to the other, but last year, Alabama, and I'm ballparking this, but I know it was over 40 under 50. Alabama had 47 more blue chip players than Washington did last year. So, watch out. The pity party might not last long for Alabama fans. They might be really, really good again. So we'll have to see how that one goes. But yeah, we'll see. But, it is interesting when you talk about Michigan, they're at number 9 after what they lost. And Washington, who played in the national championship, is all the way down at 26. So I think it's like you penalized one, but you didn't really penalize the other for losing a whole lot. But speaking of losing a whole lot and them not belonging in the top 10, so let's kind of transition into what Greg Sankey's mouthpiece had to say on whatever show he was on this week, the Jerry Springer of college football, as he is affectionately known. And so I'm just going to throw this little slide up here for those of you watching on YouTube. It's just Polly Osceola taking a bite out of Paul Finebaum. So I'm sorry if you can't see that on the podcast, but for the Pardon the Slander segment on this show, we are going to take a bite out of Paul Finebaum. And so I'm sorry. Let me
Bro had him a full mouthful of Paul.
Oh my gosh. Like you said, you'd say like scalp him, but he doesn't have a scalp to even take. So. Bro, he needs a hairpiece in the worst kind of way. But let's talk a little bit about about what he said. So he says Florida State doesn't belong in the top 10, says they will finish the season unranked, and they used up too many tears crying about not getting into the playoffs. Now, he did cite a tough schedule. That's fair. They lost a lot. That's fair. And you have a somewhat questionable quarterback. That's probably fair too. But to say they don't belong in the top 10 and will likely finish unranked, I mean, that's a little bit crazy, even for, like we said, the Jerry Springer of college football. I mean, you just saw he got roasted by Lane Kiffin for being wrong about a lot of things. And I mean, this is a guy, but I think people have to understand too, that first off, Mr. Burns here, he made his name playing to the SEC crowd. I mean, this is part of the game. This is what he does. The thing that's funny about Paul Finebaum to me is no one actually cares about what he says. So he just has to say dumb stuff to try and get attention. And if you've noticed, the less relevant that he's becoming, the more wild things he's starting to say. And this year he's been saying some pretty crazy stuff this year. But this is a guy that made his name, with the call-in show, arguing with Earl Ray and Tammy Lynn from Alabama.
That's right.
After the Iron Bowl. And so, like, it's not surprising to see this type of stuff come from a media bottom feeder like him. It's just, it's amazing to me how he actually became as popular as he did.
Yeah.
And I will say too, that I really like what RG3 came out and on Twitter and kind of blasted him. They work for the same employer, so he won't like tag him in it or anything like that. But he actually did come out on the defense. You shouldn't trash that team. You shouldn't say things like that about that team for all that they accomplished and what they went through. And I think really what it is for me is like, man, this bum has probably never stepped foot on a field, whether he was a part of the team or not. Let's just put it that way. He might have been on the team, but he wasn't getting on the field. So he has never, I call him the clickbait clown on one of my retweets. And that's all it is, man. He's just looking for attention and people are giving it to him. This guy, like I said, probably never touched a sport field in his life to even know what that felt like last year. Quick side note, like I didn't play college football or anything like that, but when I played high school football, man, our high school team was in a position to make the playoffs for the first time in school history. We were pretty trash before that. But we finally got ourselves in that position. And on senior night, we missed a game-winning field goal and lost by 2 points and did not make the playoffs. So, I mean, I've been there. You know what I mean? I know what that heartbreak feels like. And so it's like to have a guy who probably can't relate anything to that, just, man, it was like, I let a lot of dumb stuff go from a guy like that. And I hate even giving him the attention that he wants, but you talked about her mama. So we're coming for you in this one. So
this is yo mama level comment right here, Paul Finebaum. Like, you don't come after our boys like that. Like, you can talk about how the fact that Florida State has a quarterback that has been around the country sometime. He struggled at Clemson. Is he going to fit here? You can talk about the fact that Florida State lost a lot of players and they have a more difficult schedule this year. And the ACC is looking a little bit tougher this year. So you don't believe that for sure, man. I'll even let you bring up the snub and say, they're coming off the snub and whether or not you think they should have gotten in. I didn't think they should have got in, blah, blah. I'll live with that. But you're going to talk about these boys crying, tears. Are you kidding me, bro? Those are fighting words, man. And the thing is, I don't know if we should be taking advice from a guy who looks like, you remember Jeff Dunham used to do that puppet called Walter? Remember that? And I don't think we should be taking advice from a guy who looks like a puppet with a man has his hand stuck up him to do a bit on a comedy show. You know what I mean?
I'm sure Greg Sankey's hand somewhere up that puppet.
Exactly. Like, I mean, come on. Like you said, Paul doesn't even know football if one hit him in the head. He just says stuff all the time so that he can be known. And like you said, he is the mouthpiece of the SEC. Basically, he gets his marching orders from the SEC headquarters. Whatever they want him to put out there, he's going to say it. And he says the most ridiculous thing. He's been on this thing against Florida State since the snub. He has been repeatedly just after them. And I love the fact that a bunch of Florida State players, even including former national champion Brian Stork, came out, was like, y'all don't even pay attention to this fool. DJ Lundy said, okay, keep them receipts. You talk about not that these guys need any more motivation, but this is perfect prime bulletin board material. I hope at the
100%.
end of the season, I would love for Mike Norvell to lift that national title trophy, walk over to that desk, because Paul
Finebaum.
Finebaum is going to be sitting there and just crack him one good time across the head.
Exactly. Like, we need the crystal trophy back so you can just
exactly
just walk over there and DDT him on the set. Like, that would be, because he wouldn't say that to Mike Norvell's face to begin with. So
no, he would not.
Yeah,
he would not.
So one more time for old Paul Finebaum here, getting the chew.
Doesn't it look like a lollipop in his?
Looks like he's smoking a cigar or something. So I hope you guys enjoyed our first segment of Pardon the Slander. We may have to bring that one back throughout the season. Let us know what you think about that. But again, man, like you said, it's one thing to give your honest opinion, but then to go in and stab and twist like that, man, we've moved on from that. It is what it is. And, I mean, Paul Finebaum wouldn't know his way onto a field, regardless one way or the other. And I will say this, for every Paul Finebaum out there is a Booger McFarland. There is an RG3, right. The guys that went to bat for us. So, no one expects anything less from him. And you know what, man, I almost kind of want to go to the Big Ten just so you don't have to deal with bums like that. So anyway, let's get into some football talk now. But that was a really fun one. I thought
that was a good one. I like that.
I thought we'd have a good laugh out of that one. Let us know what you guys thought of that sections, if we should bring it back during the show. Now, before we get into the talk, let's talk about today's sponsor real quick, Michael. And this is one that I know that you guys are going to like. This is a app. It's totally free. That should be in every sports fan's arsenal. And that is the Autograph app. They have all kinds of news, podcasts, YouTube videos right there inside the app. You don't have to go searching for content all across the internet or social media. It's all right there. And you get rewarded for doing it. So you can win chances to get discounted tickets, merchandise, all kinds of stuff. I use it every day. I really like it. They have a feature called Rewind where you can kind of get the too long didn't read to stay up to date, or you can dive into deeper articles. Our articles are on there. Our podcast episodes are on there. So make sure you guys check out the Autograph app. Use code Spirit sign up if you get it through the App Store, or I'll link it below to make it easy on you guys. But I promise you will not be disappointed. And you're going to want that in your arsenal for the season that's coming up. You can have as many teams in there as you want. NFL, NBA, baseball, who knows? You can probably find some Paul Finebaum on there somewhere if you wanted to. So with that being said, let's get into some offensive talk. We're going to talk about Florida State's kind of an offensive outlook for 2024. We're going to start by kind of looking back at what happened last year, where we're going into this year. And again, man, I think that when you look at what they've done over these last 2 years, I mean, you're seeing Mike Norvell at his finest. This is why we went out and got Mike Norvell as head coach in the first place. He is the samurai of scheme, if I may.
Yes.
The wizard of the whiteboard. And
and
so that's all I got. I ran out. I tried to think.
That was it. It was a 1, 2, and then
I've been trying all day to have a third one, and I couldn't come up with nothing. So I don't know. Maybe you guys drop one in the comments or something if you can think of something good to go with that. But this is why I'm so confident in Mike Norvell, because you look back at his history and it's so impressive. And so now you look at the last 2 years at Florida State. We know when he got here, he had an offense built for playmakers. My guy didn't have no playmakers. So we had to kind of get things rolling. And since then, you've seen that offense climb up. And they have produced a top 20 offense at Florida State in back-to-back seasons. And this is the first time that's happened since 2012, 2013, way back in the day. So they have got things really rolling here at Florida State now. And I think they're going to continue that trend. Now, I will say this year, it's going to look a little bit different. I think last year's offense was kind of a standout year for Mike Norvell's offense. I think when you look back at that, the crazy thing is a lot of the metrics, they kind of dropped off, but they still put up points. And when you look at 2022, which was one of the best offenses we've had at Florida State in a really long time. I mean, they ran the ball successfully. They were able to throw the ball. They moved the football that year. They put up 36.1 points, which was tied for 16th. And look, here at the end of the day, man, we can give all the stats and numbers that we want. There's only one that matters, and that's scoring offense. That's putting points on the board. And so this year, in 2023, or last year, they put up 34.6, so barely a drop-off at all. And that was tied for 18th. But what's interesting is if you adjust for the bowl debacle that we're just going to assume that didn't happen. When you actually had your team play, when you had your playmakers playing without the bowl, they averaged around 37 points a game, which would have put them around 11th. And so the points were still there, even though some things looked different on the stat sheet. And so I do think when you look at last year, there was a lot of that offense that they just had better guys. And so they were able to go out and just do things differently. And I think we're going to get back to some old Mike Norvell style offenses. But, when you look back at his history at Memphis, they had a top 10 offense in 3 out of the 4 seasons there. They averaged 41.9 points per game, top 15 in all 4 years, 40 points a game in 3 out of 4 years. I mean, again, that's why I call him the samurai of scheme. This guy is an absolute animal at something. I can't come up with nothing.
I got three for you as you were talking. Okay. I got goat of the gridiron.
I like it.
Okay. Sorcerer of the scoreboard.
I like it.
And prince of the play calling.
Prince of the play calling. Let's go with it. So the Prince of play calling at Arizona State, he also had a top 20 offense in 3 of the 4 seasons there as well, averaging 37.4 points per game. So he's had a top 25 scoring offense in 9 out of 12 seasons. So, I mean, this is what Mike Norvell does. This is why you brought him in. And so that's just kind of where Florida State's offense was last year. Again, like we said, some of the stats were down a little bit, but you also really have to dissect that offense with Jordan Travis and without Jordan Travis, because it fell off an absolute cliff once he was out. That probably doesn't work out well for our argument of getting in the playoffs, but that's neither here nor there. We know what Jordan was. So while the offense did look different last year, again, it was still productive, but there were some areas that they struggled that we think, like I just said, with this offense, when you just have the dudes, when you have Jordan Travis, Trey Benson, Johnny Wilson, Keon, and Jaheim, and you can just go out and basically take it from people like, hey, we're going to go run this play until you stop us. And not a lot of teams could stop them. That was kind of the offense that we had last year. I think this year you're going to see more like 2022, where you had to be a tactician, to be able to put up points. And so some of the areas that I think, looking back at 2022 and Mike Norvell's history, let's go into a couple areas that I would like to see them make some improvement. And I think the first one is explosive plays. And so that is plays of over 20 yards. Now, when you look at Mike Norvell's history, his best offenses feature a lot of explosive plays, usually about 90 plus on average. At Memphis, he had 90 plus in 3 out of 4 years. Every year that they had 90 plus plays, they finished it with a top 10 offense. When you look at Florida State in 2022, the best offense that we just said at Florida State, they had 97. They were third in the country. Last year, that number dropped to 74, which was 22nd. Still very respectable. But, man, I would really like to see those explosive plays come back to this offense, because when they do, that's when Mike Norvell's offense is at its best. And I think you'll see that. We'll get into a little bit more of the specifics of how it'll happen here in just a little bit. But I think with DJU and the speed at receiver you have and hopefully a better improved, we won't say much better, but improved offensive line play, I think they'll be in line to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look back at that again, like you said, the 2022 offense was insanely good. And gosh, you just think about if they didn't go on that 3-game losing streak, where would they have ended up in the season? I mean, if they'd at least beat, if they at least won the games that they had a chance of winning, which was
they should have beat NC State.
They should have beat NC State.
That game still pisses me off.
Yes, it does. Oh gosh, I remember exactly where I was too. They should have beat NC State. They came back against Wake Forest. They just ran out of time. And the Clemson game was, I don't know how to categorize that game, because they never led. It was never like close. But towards the end, you kind of felt like, if they had a little bit more time, maybe. But
Clemson pulling off the gas?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That NC State game, they should have won. They should have finished the season 11-2 last year. Yeah. But you look at that offense. I mean, 10th in total offense, with 484 yards, 13th in rushing offense, 214 yards, 28th in passing offense, 270 yards average. Like you said, tied for 16 with 31.1 points average per game. And then the slip to the 23, which was the 2023 team, was supposed to be better, more talented, more blue chip, right? Everything. We went into that season thinking we about to run this thing. And then you saw what they did to LSU, and you're like, there is no team out there except maybe Clemson that's going to be able to shut this offensive down. And what you end up seeing because of the injury, because of just some players didn't play up to their standard. The offense suffered a little bit, went to 52nd in total yards, 76 in rushing yards, 45th in passing yards, and then dropped to 19th in scoring offense. And so you saw what they did. They were able to still score, but Mike Norvell was in a lot of ways, the as you said, the wizard of the whiteboard was he had to operate with one hand tied behind his back. They couldn't run the ball the way he wanted to.
Yeah,
the Clemson game was a glaring a view of that. But you think this year, like you said, based on what we've heard and seen and the trajectory of players, you would believe that we're going to get back to what has made Mike Norvell the prince of play calling.
Yeah, and so when you talk about the samurai of the scheme, I'm looking. I almost forgot mid sentence, so I had to pull that one out, like an Adam Fuller halftime adjustment. I had to pull that one out. So you lead right into it though, man. One of the next areas that I would like to see Florida State get better is the run. And I think when you look at fixing the run, I think that fixes it pretty much everything else we're going to talk about here. And last year, that's where they really struggled the most. And Mike Norvell, as we know, is kind of a run first guy. He favors the run when they can run the ball. They run it a lot. Florida State last year averaged around 33 carries a game when he's successful at running the ball. They'll run it up to 40 plus times a game. I think in the 2018 season when they had an insane rushing offense, they had 2,000-yard backs. Florida State has not had one since Cam Akers in 2017. That is bonkers. And so that year, I think they ran the ball over 50 times a game in like 4 games and 40 times a game in 11 different games. They will pound the rock. And last year, they just couldn't do it. That when you look at that Clemson game, they only ran the ball 20 times, which is a career low as a head coach for Mike Norvell, because he just knew there wasn't a whole lot that he could do. And so even when you look at his time at Florida State, I mean, and going back to Memphis, they pretty much run the ball around 55 to 60% of the time. And the only time that they didn't, that was sub 50%, was in 2017, looking back at Memphis. But they threw for 4,300 yards. And so we did not throw for 4,300 yards. So I think that's the thing about Norvell. He can play to his strengths, right? But I think the run game wasn't there. You usually need to have a little bit of both.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, they weren't terrible at running the ball. It just wasn't anything like we saw in 2022, because their 150-yard a game average last year was actually the lowest yards per game average Mike Norvell has had in his career as a play caller. So we're hoping they get much better this year. And I mean, just when you look at just a couple numbers here, the success rate, which is getting the yards necessary on the down to get the first down, your success rate in 2023, your passing was 60th in the country and your rush was 87th. So there was a little bit of a gap there. When you look at EPA, which is expected points added, just kind of like Paul Finebaum, I don't really know what he's talking about, but I just know I know it's a stat.
I bet Paul Finebaum came up with that stat.
Probably. Ears per attempt, maybe, but his expected his expected points added. When you look at the difference between Florida State's pass and rush, their EPA per pass last year was 29th in the country. That was pretty good. EPA per rush was all the way down at 91st. So you see the split. You see the difference. And, and really for me, when we talk about the running the ball, I think, yes, you lose Trey Benson, who is a home run hitter for you, and a guy that you probably don't have a guy maybe with that ceiling in the running back room now, but you have a lot of guys that you like. And so I think that behind a better offensive line, and again, we'll get into kind of the nuts and bolts of that here in just a second. I think the running game is something that will be of focus for them to improve, knowing how much Mike Norvell likes to lean on it. And I also think that it will improve this year.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really believe that we're going to see a significant uptick in the run game. I mean, you don't go from 13 to 76 in the country. That's a 63 spot drop, man. That's an elevator falling down on a building. I mean, that is drastic. Now we know that a lot of that had to do not with necessarily scheme, because we've seen the scheme work, had a lot to do with injuries or inconsistent play. It was so crazy because going into the season, we thought, man, this is going to be an incredible run blocking team. This offensive line, what we were worried about, at least I know what I was worried about, was more of like pass blocking. Are they going to be able to hold up, give Jordan time? And what ended up happening was the opposite. They were great at pass blocking, but they were, I won't say atrocious because that's mean. They were not very good at running the ball. And it was a boom or bust rate. You and I have talked about this before. It was like either you're getting tackled 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage, or you're busting out for 25 yards or a touchdown. Like it was, but you never knew what you were going to get from the run game. There was no consistency in it. So yeah, I totally agree. I think we're going to see an improvement there. I think, Mike and them been working all off season. Obviously the offensive line, we'll talk about that in just a second. We believe they've gotten better and they continue to get better. Mike said somewhere in there that we basically have like 8 guys that can really start for us. And I think that's confidence. I don't think Mike would say that without him actually feeling confident that he actually has 8 starters, that at the worst, your second line is just a net zero. Like they don't give, right? And at your best, they're taking away. So yeah, I think we'll see a marketable improvement in the run game.
Definitely. And I think you probably have dang near 8 running backs too. We talked about the 3-headed monster back in the day. Well, that thing's a giant squid now or whatever. We got 8 different tentacles that we can put at you. But I think when you talk about the run game, I think that leads into one of the areas that I really think they need to make a big improvement on. And that's third down. And a lot of that has to do with keeping the chains moving and not putting yourself in bad situations on third down. I mean, when you look at what just their overall conversions in 2021, they were god awful. 105th in the country, 34.8%. In 2022, they made a massive climb. 51.2%, up to 4th in the country. But then last year, you fell right back down to 94th in the country, 36.3% conversions. And so you're going to have to get better. But again, I think a lot of that has to do with your running the ball and being able to keep the chains moving. And so like when you look at third and short to medium, that's 1 to 6 yards. Those are the ones you feel like you should be able to pick up, not third and long where it's an obvious passing down. You can go either way with your play calling. So in 2022, 53.6% of their third downs were short to medium yardage. Last year, that number fell down to 43.7. So you had a lot less third downs that were more manageable. And then the crazy thing is here, when you look at them running the ball on the ground in third and short situations, which is only 1 to 3 yards, that should be a daggone give me right there. In 2022, they converted 68%. In 2023, they only converted 48% of third and short on the ground. That's not good. And they had 41 in 2022 and only 29 last year, third downs and third and short were running situations. So they were pretty bad on being able to pick up that short yardage situation. And it's like you talked about, you're either losing yardage or you're busting for 30. But I think this is also obviously, and we're going to get into this, but this is where DJU helps you big time in that third and short game. Now, third and medium was about kind of equal there, 63% in 2022, 60% in 2023, but they only attempted 5 third and mediums, which is 4 to 6 yards. They only attempted 5 third downs at the medium yardage range on the ground. Only 5 in 2022. The whole season.
Wow.
Because I think he knew they could not run the ball for more than about 2 or 3 yards unless they were going to bust it open. They actually converted more than they even attempted in 2022. They went 10 of 16 for 63%. So it just tells you that Mike Norvell knew that they struggled to run the ball. And so I think that is going to really help with third downs if you get DJ involved in the run game, if you get that run game fixed. And the last area that I want to see them before we get into the 2024 outlook, the last area I would really like to see them make even just a slight improvement here is red zone scoring. So we didn't do a lot of stuff right in 2021, but we scored in the red zone pretty good. 90.5% scoring rate, tied for 16th in the country. 73.8% of those scores were touchdowns. 2022 fell off a little bit, 84.9%, 60th in the country, around 70% touchdowns. But then 2023, it came up a little bit, the amount that you scored, 87.3%, 45th in the country. But the amount of touchdowns fell down a pretty good bit. 60% of your scores were touchdowns. Field goals accounted for 27.3% of your red zone scores, and that is the highest since 2015 for Mike Norvell. Between then and now, he's only had one other season above 20%. So, when you look at 22, I think a lot of the high touchdown rate was due to you didn't have confidence in your kicker. You didn't trust Fitzgerald at all. And I think that's
right.
Honestly, that's part of what cost you that NC State game, because
Yep.
you changed your game plan. You knew you couldn't kick it in the red zone. Now that things have changed, I think you got Mr. Automatic back there, knock on wood, shout out Fitzgerald. But you want him to still feel like Mr. Automatic.
Right.
But you want to get that touchdown rate up some. And you want to get 7, not 3 when you get to the end zone, because you're going to be playing against some better offenses this year. So you're going to need, points are going to be at a premium. So that's another area I'd like to see them excel this year.
Yeah, I mean, what's the old saying? 7 is better than 3, right? I think everybody would agree with that.
I don't know where that's written down, but it should be in a history book somewhere.
It's somewhere. Somebody said, Galileo said 7 is better than 3, bruh.
Exactly. Join my fantasy league.
Exactly. But my point is that 7 is better than 3. Yes, 3 helps, but 7 is better. So when you get down into the red zone, you got to cash in. It's why if you ever watch TV, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, for those of you listening on the podcast, I'm holding my fingers up and I'm rubbing my 2 pointers against my thumbs. That's the money sign, right? Yeah. There's a reason why Mike Norvell does this every time on third down. It's the money down. It's the money making down. You want NFL scouts to look at you. You want to be considered a great player, or players making these. What you do on third down matters. It matters, right? What you do in the red zone is a money zone. It's the money zone. It's where you cash in. You go get those 7 points, because at the end of the day, if you're settling for 3, you're going to end up, depending on how your defense is playing, it could cost you the game. NC State all over again. And so I think Mike Norvell is even more adamant. I've heard reports of that. Mike has been on them because this year he believes he's got the team that is more, in a sense, more well-rounded. That 2022 team was a good passing team for sure. We had Johnny, but Johnny was kind of like really the biggest weapon in the pass game. It was that running game that really opened up everything for us. Then reverse that, and we still had weapons in the run game, but we just couldn't run the ball as well. So the pass game became the thing. I think this year you're going to see a full-fledged Mike Norvell offense, passing, running, the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah, I agree, man. And I think, there is going to be something to that leave no doubt mentality. Last year, I've talked about this before. I think hindsight is always 2020, and we didn't get the opportunity of hindsight. Mike Norvell doesn't get the opportunity of hindsight, but we took a knee in scoring position at Pitt. We took a knee in scoring position at Florida. I think now you're going to see them. There's going to be no mercy held, and obviously you got to be put yourself in a position to do that. I mean, you got to go out and win the games and do the things you got to do. But I think with the comments and stuff like that, and what happened last year with strength of schedule, I think you're going to see that type of Mike Norvell come out. And I imagine he's probably got a picture of Paul Finebaum on his wall in his office, and every day he walks out, maybe he just punches a hole in it or something like that. So
he taps it.
Exactly. I think it's going to be, I think they are going to try and put the hammer down on people this year. I think you'll see less sportsmanship from this offense. They're going to try and be full go, all gas, no brakes in the offense. And so let's talk about this 2024 offense. We've talked about what they did. We've talked about where we want to see them get better. Now let's talk about this actual offense. And so I think, like we've kind of been joking the whole time, I think you do see a return of the scheme ninja Norvell.
Yeah.
I think when you remember, this is probably the most beautiful play call I've ever seen. If you think back to when we couldn't do much, I mean, they probably could let me play quarterback way back in the day in 2020 and 2021. But you remember back in that North Carolina game where they upset the number 5 North Carolina, and they had that one play where everybody, including the cameraman, was going to the right.
Yes.
And then old Preston Daniels just over there doing jumping jacks in the middle of the field. That is the type of stuff that you see Mike Norvell scheme up. That is the type of stuff that makes Mike Norvell a dangerous play caller. And I think that is what you're going to see more this year. I think you're going to see less of that we have better athletes, jump ball type of offense. I think you're going to see them scheme more guys into space and less relying on just talented playmakers to go up and get it in a mismatch situation. And I think that's going to be exciting. I think you're going to see the tactician come out. And I think a lot of that is going to be because you're going to see the return of the run game. I think we're going to go into a very run-heavy offense this year. I think you're going to see 2 back sets come back, which is something that he ran a lot at Memphis when you had multiple backs to spread it out to. Now, I do think in turn, that means you're going to be more reliant on offensive line and tight end blocking. You're going to need those guys to step up. I think that's really going to be the entire linchpin of the season. Like, people talk about DJU and what he's going to do and what he cannot. I think when you look at DJU, you kind of know where his floor is. As long as he can do just a smidge better than he's done the last couple of seasons as far as consistency, I think you're going to be fine there. I think it's really hinges more on the offensive line play, but we expect them to be better, and we'll talk about them a little bit more in depth in just a second. I think you are going to have better blocking tight ends this year as well, and then you're going to have that deeper backfield. So that's something that I'm looking at as some overall thoughts. I think you'll see more play action because it's what DJ did well last year. And then again, we touched on this before. I think you'll see less of a boom or bust type of offense. Now, you don't have quite as many home run hitters this year with just the big names that you lost last year. So you might not see as many big booms, but I don't think you're going to see as many busts either. I think it's going to be a more consistent offense at moving the chains. And then again, I think one thing that's going to be a big narrative of this offense is design quarterback runs. And I got a stat for you when we transition to quarterbacks here in just a second. But I think with quarterback power on third downs, man, you're going to see DJ be a big part of this run game, which is something we haven't had from design run standpoint anyway. And then I think you're going to see an offense that is built to be less reliant on one individual player. I think there's a few guys that have to stay healthy. I'll be honest about that. I think Malik Benson is a guy that's going to have to stay healthy. But I think it's not going to be such a fall off if one guy gets hurt. So give me some overall thoughts, and then let's kind of talk about the personnel that we got here.
Yeah, I agree with you. Last year we had to really depend on Jordan's throwing or, I was about to say Jordan's leg, but he's very hesitant to run last year. And then when he finally did, some stupid North Alabama guy, decided to take a nap on his ankle. And so I think the offense is going to be better because it's going to be more well-rounded. You're actually going to be able to see Mike Norvell open up the bag and really call the kind of plays that doesn't limit, but actually tells a story of what he's trying to do. Any great offensive play caller will tell you that the whole idea early on is to kind of set up, get a feel, but also attack. Mike has always been that way. He wants to get downhill. He wants to run at you. He wants to throw a bomb over top of you. He wants to get you off your heels so that you can never really adjust. And so then they just overwhelm you. I mean, you saw how we did that with teams last year, but some teams it took us a little bit longer to get to, a little bit longer to get going because maybe, for many different factors that we have no access to of knowing. But I think overall, though, with the addition of the running backs, with the offensive line being much more improved, with hopefully some wide receivers stepping up and what we believe will be good quarterback play, we can for sure see an avenue where Florida State is better than what they were last year, at least from stat wise.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of crazy to even say that because a lot of people that's why they're projecting Florida State to have a little bit of a down year is because they're not going to be able to produce on offense like they did last year. And, again, I think there's a multitude of reasons why you could point out to it not being a better offense. And I also think there's a lot of reasons why, as many as you could probably point out to why it's not going to be a better offense. I think you could point to just as many for why it may be a better offense. And so let's get into a little bit of the personnel talk here. And before we share some overall thoughts on where the offense is going to end up for the 2024 season. And we'll start with quarterback. Now, if you guys want a deep dive on DJU and the quarterback position, we just took care of that for you. Over an hour, ridiculously deep dive on the quarterback position. I will make it the video that shows up at the end of these things. However, you know what I'm talking about. We'll make that happen for you so you can go watch it next. I encourage you guys to watch that because if you don't believe in DJU after that video, you probably never will be. But just share some quick thoughts on DJ and the quarterback position here. So I think first off, you have to define your expectations with DJU, right? He's not Jordan Travis. He's not as efficient as Jordan Travis. He's not, air quotes, as electric as Jordan Travis. He's not that Houdini in the backfield who, can evade 15 guys with pressure and all that stuff. That's just not who DJ is. But that doesn't mean he can't be a really important and crucial part of this offense. Will he probably make more mistakes? Yeah, you will probably expect more mistakes out of him than Jordan Travis. Jordan Travis, again, is a guy that we've seen have a high completion rate, efficient with the ball. But I think what DJ brings to the table is, one, you have that better deep ball thrower, and we already talked about explosive plays in Mike Norvell's offense. We know that he can make, again, we don't always intend to say one guy's good at something to say that another guy was bad at something. We just realize people have different strengths, and the deep ball was not necessarily Jordan Travis's strength. So I think that will be a bigger component to your offense this year. I think when you look back to even 2022, when you had more speed at receiver and maybe not as much size with a guy like Pokey Wilson, the first thing that comes to my mind is that Miami game where, we basically delivered the kill shot like 2.5 minutes into the game or whatever it was, because Miami didn't score after pretty much anything after that. And so I think when you just that one play where Pokey Wilson takes the top off the defense, I think you're going to see a lot of that this year with Malik Benson. But I also think you have a guy that can make more of the throws that you're looking for. Like if you have a play action rollout, Jordan didn't always have the arm strength to get it back across the field. And I think DJU is a guy that was throwing at 80 yards in high school. So I don't think he's going to have any issues there. I think DJU is a better passer than people think, especially when you give him a clean pocket and when receivers don't drop the ball.
Yeah, exactly.
That is a big issue that we had last year. That is a big issue that DJ has had at different programs in different areas. And so when you just look at his deep ball stats, I think, when you look at the numbers last year, he was on par with Michael Penix and had even slightly better numbers than Carson Beck at Georgia in 2023. And so I think that plus the speed at wide receiver, that's going to equal explosive plays for this offense. And so I'm definitely excited what DJU can bring. And then just to touch on him real quick in the running game, again, this is a guy, he's not as elusive or an elite scrambler as Jordan Travis, but he's more durable. He's tough. Yeah. He's tough to bring down. I think he can be a bigger part of the run game because, Jordan Travis last year, we kept screaming, man, run the ball. And you saw how it changed. You saw how it changed the offense when he did. And so I think you will see, but he was more of a scrambler guy. And I think DJU will be more of a designed run guy. He ran the ball over 100 times in each of his last season, 2 seasons at Clemson. And when you look at his rushing attempts throughout his career, 72.5% of his yardage have been from designed runs. So he's actually not a real big scramble guy. But again, quarterback power on third down, third and short, things like that. You need a first down. Give me all of that.
Red zone,
Right. And I think red zone, we talked about that. Red zone scoring. I think DJU is going to make a difference there. And one stat I'll give you that I thought was interesting, then I'll kick it back to you. But in 2022 at Clemson, DJU had 129 carries. He had 24 runs of 10-plus yards. Last year in 2023, Trey Benson had 156 carries, and he had 23 runs of 20-plus yards. So to say that DJ is not a guy that can get out in space and hurt you with his legs, I mean, he had more runs of 10-plus on less carries than Trey Benson did last year. So I think he can be a vital part of this run game, as well as being a very competent passer when you look at what Mike Norvell and them have done with quarterbacks in their history.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally see there being design packages for him, whether it's funny, they could really run Wildcat just with him back there instead of having to put a running back out there. I think you'll see a lot of different schemes up. I think Mike will be more willing to run them since he seems to be a lot more durable than Jordan Travis. This is no knock to Jordan Travis, but we know Jordan Travis has had injuries before. And so maybe Mike gets a little bit more aggressive with that. But like you said, those third and shorts, goal line, whatever that may be. I think you'll see him leverage that more. Not because he doesn't believe in Fitz magic, knock on wood again.
Right.
He does. But I think Mike Norvell just is a natural aggressive play caller. He wants the 7 because you remember 7 in the hand is better than 3 in the bush, as they say.
I would imagine. I think there was a wizard of the whiteboard that said that back in the day.
So. I really do. And so, but I really do. I really feel like this will be a much more identical to what you saw at Memphis. We kind of been waiting on that to see that offense show up, and we got glimpses and pieces of it each year. Some aspect of it would show, but I think this is probably the first year we'll see the full, complete, Memphis version of a Mike Norvell offense just done in Florida State's context. And I think it's going to be the thing that gets us pretty far this season.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I will say, I do think an advantage that they'll have this year is the in-helmet communications. I think that'll do twofold. I think one, you'll help DJ be able to get into those alignments and checks, relatively fast. I think they'll help
Right.
him be able to make those reads quick. And then two, I think it might actually speed up the offense. When you look at Mike Norvell, they typically run a lot of plays, and they
Right.
didn't quite get there last year. And I don't know if that has to do with the new clock rules and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But I do think knowing that it cuts off at 15 seconds, you'll probably want to push the pace to get
Exactly.
lined up so you can start making adjustments. Now, of course, defense can make adjustments too,
Right.
but I think you will see that speed up the pace of the offense. And, Mike Norvell's already talked about how DJU has good command of the offense. I also think you're better at quarterback two situation. If
That's right.
something were to happen with DJ or he underperforms or something like that, I think you feel better about bringing Brock Glennon off the bench. I think you'll see more of them this year than you did last year, than you did of Tate Rodemaker last year. So that's going to do it for quarterback. Like I said, guys, if you want an in-depth dive on the quarterback position in DJU, go check out that other episode. But looking at the guys up front, and it all starts here. Again, I think this team is going to be very heavily reliant on the offensive line and tight end blocking this year, because everything they're going to want to do is going to be based off running the ball and giving DJU a clean pocket. The thing is, you have a very experienced group. You have better depth this year. You have a higher talent floor than last season. We've seen this offensive line be built for a long time with transfers from group of five programs and things like that. Now you're starting to see you're getting SEC transfers like Keandre Jones and Richie Leonard and guys, TJ Ferguson from Alabama. You're starting to get that higher talent floor. Now, the thing that I will say about the experience is doesn't always mean you're going to be great, because looking at 2024, Florida State does have 190 starts this year. That's third most in the country. Very experienced offensive line. In 2023, that number was 208. You had the most starts in the entire country on the offensive line, and they got worse than they were in 2022. Now, of course, injuries had a lot to do with that.
That's
Guys
right.
playing out of their position had a lot to do with that. But this year, we feel like you have a legitimate two deep. Phil Steele has you as the number one offensive line in the ACC, number 5 in the country. And, goodness gracious. Like we always joke about, if we had a top 5 offensive line in the country, we prayed for times like these.
That's right. Right.
I don't know when the last time you can say that, maybe 2013. But it's been a long time. And so if you have that workout, I think another big component this year is that you do have more athletic guards. And I think that will play a big part in what they want to do with moving that personnel. You obviously have Robert Scott back, who's another talented guy. I don't know if he's going to start this year, but at least he'll be a starter level backup for you. Again, I think Keandre Jones is a guy to watch out for, because he's a great run blocker. I'm really excited about the two additions in Richie Leonard and TJ Ferguson. When you go back TJ Ferguson is a massive human being with SEC experience. When you go back and look at some of his history, there's a little bit of underperformance there. So I am a little bit concerned there. I think Richie Leonard, you kind of know what you're getting there. I think Florida's offensive line was not great last year, but I think he was one of the better ones that they had. Right. So I think he will elevate where you're at. But again, you have so much competition in that group. Competition breeds excellence. And I think you will have the best and the deepest offensive line we've had in some time. And with their success, I think goes the success of the offense. If they have a really good year like the 2022 line did, if they struggle and the guys, maybe get injured or something like that, you have better depth, but that's where things start to get concerned to me. But I feel really good about the offensive line. I feel like this is one of those positions where there's not a lot of guesswork. You take the check to the bank. You know what I mean?
Right. No, that's right. You listen, the most important position in the offense is not quarterback, and quarterback is really, really important.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter if you got Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, DJ, Jordan Travis, Jameis Winston, Chris Winkie, Charlie Ward. I don't care. You name them all. I don't care if you got all of those into one. That'd be an ugly looking child. But if you got all of those into one,
they would take home all the Heismans.
Yeah, take all Heisman. It wouldn't matter, because if your offensive line can't give you time to throw, if your offensive line doesn't help you in the run game area, you won't be the Heisman Trophy winner. You'll be living in the ICU. You won't be that. And so
you'll be James Blackman.
Oh my gosh, James Blackman. Man, some of the hits I remember him taking, and DeAndre Francois. God, they would get tough. Nailed. But yeah, and so again, you see now where back in like you said, how we used to pray for times like this, like
Yeah.
having a decent offensive line to where now, like we've heard out of camp, we've heard out of Mike Norvell, where now he believes that he has 8 starters, 8 guys that can play, and that your worst guy on that 8 would start for most Power 5 teams, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so that's actually just it's a great thing to hear. And if preseason camp word that we've been hearing, stories and reports we've been hearing is true, then this will be the best offensive line Mike Norvell has had in his time at Florida State. And I can just only imagine, Jesse, what he can do with that.
Oh, I'm so excited about it if it turns out to be that way, because if you, like I said, if you give DJ a clean pocket, he's a really good passer. If, we think they're going to run a lot of play action this year, that's going to be successful for DJ. Play action only works if you can run the ball.
That's right.
And so it's going to all start with those guys up there. But again, I think it's the depth and the competition and the talent floor that's all been raised there. I think you have guys that have, some of the guys who have another season of experience. Guys that might actually get to play their position for a whole year, like Darius Washington. Let's see what he can do at tackle for a whole year. That's exciting as well. And so I think that hopefully they stay healthy. I think that'll have a lot to do with it. But overall, I think this is going to be a really good group and good for this offense. So let's talk about the guys behind them real quick. We'll just run through the list of backs here, and I'll share some thoughts, and I'll kick it to you for some thoughts on everybody here. I think overall, when you look at them, this is a deep and diverse group of backs. What's interesting about this group to me is that none of them have really been the guy at their school or wherever they're at. Like there hasn't really been a Dalvin Cook, a Cam Akers, a even Trey Benson at whatever school they've been at. It's always kind of been the running back 2, running back 3 guy, or they're just a young and up and coming back that hasn't developed yet. But I think the good thing is when you look at this group at the same time, while you say that, there's also not one guy that you don't like in this entire group. And I think you feel really good about everybody in this room. And so you could see, you've seen where Mike Norvell has taken a guy like Trey Benson that had 6 carries before he got here and turned him into an NFL draft pick. So
that's right.
I feel good about the guys they got. The one guy that I really love the addition to this room is Roydell Williams, coming over from Alabama. 560 yards last season as the number 2 back in the SEC with Alabama. There are 5 touchdowns. This is a guy, he's an all-purpose back, a power back. Coming into the season with losing Trey Benson, really outside of Cam Davis, you didn't have a power back.
Right.
And Mike Norvell was going to not really have any of that. So he goes out and he finds one from Alabama. And what's interesting to me when you look at Roydell Williams, 560 yards on the season, 375 of those came after contact. So, the thing with him, a lot of times he reminds me of a guy that has like the power of Trey Benson and the patience of Trayshawn Ward. When Trayshawn used to just kind of like hang out behind the line, make a sandwich, hang out a little bit, talk to, hey, what y'all doing over there? And then when the block's set up, he would take off.
He's gone.
I think you get a little bit of that of both of that with Roydell Williams. The thing that I do like about him as well is he doesn't do a lot out of the backfield receiving, but he's efficient. He caught 11 passes on 12 targets, 58 yards and a touchdown. Also, knock on wood, has not recorded a fumble in 2 years. So we know they prioritize taking care of the ball here as at Florida State as well. He's gotten better every year. He just hasn't had a lot of carries. You look at what he did last year, some of his highlights, he tore up USF, who did have a top 50 defense against the run. I know it's USF, but top 50 run defense there. 17 carries, 129 yards, 7.6 yards per carry and a touchdown. Ate him up. Then he also did put up 65 yards against Georgia in the SEC championship game. So again, they trusted him to start the SEC title game at Alabama. Now, the thing with him, I will say, is he was number 2 behind Jason McClellan at Alabama, but his yards per carry and his yards after contact were just a shade higher. So, man, I'm really loving the addition of Roydell Williams. I think he's going to be kind of your 1A, 1B with Toafili, kind of more that halfback position. Then when you go to tailback, you'll have Toafili. 69 attempts last year, 463 yards, 6.71 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. But it's his multiple skill set that really makes Toafili so dangerous. 21 receptions, 186 yards last year and a touchdown. When I went back and looked, Toafili has had a really kind of up and down career since he got to Florida State. He's had a 9.6 yards per carry his freshman season, dropped down to 5.1, dropped to 4.8. You saw him get pushed kind of down the depth chart. Last year, it came up to 6.7. Now I think it's his time to shine. He's coming off an ACC championship game MVP appearance there. He's put up over 600 all-purpose yards in both of the past 2 seasons. Last year alone, he was 7th in yards per carry among Power 5 running backs. with I think at least 50 carries. 6th in yards after contact on average, 11th in breakaway run percentage, which are design runs that go for over 15 yards. So when he gets the ball, he has a good percentage of having a breakout run. And so, man, I'm loving what these two backs bring at the top of the order. Now we're going to get into the guys behind them as well, but I think you have a really good 1-2 punch here. And I really like also what you've heard about both of them from fall camp, stepping into that starting role. Guys have had to do that before. I think it's now their time to step into that role, and I like what I've heard out of camp so far.
Yeah, same here. I've liked that the offensive line is blocking, that the running backs are getting in the holes, making plays. They're also lining up to block well because, believe it or not, people have forgotten that the running backs have to also learn pass blocking, at least in their way that they learn it. And so, I think David Johnston's doing a great job with that room. Like you said, Roydell Williams, Toll-Feely, I for sure think they're going to be there as the 1-2 punch, that lightning and thunder in a sense. Even though that, like you said, Roydell has good speed, but he's not that breakaway, like just that hits that second gear. Jalen Lucas, even Toll-Feely has that. I remember toe touch Toll-Feely in that Clemson game down in Death Valley. Just pulled away from the guy, and so I think Roydell and Toll-Feely I'm assuming they're going to be your top 2 starters. You're going to see what some people either call split shotgun or pony, which you have the quarterback and then you have running backs on both sides of you. The why I think you'll see that is because you can run motion. Motion makes it harder for the defense to diagnose whether they need to be man or zone. And then Mike has leveraged it so well, to use the counter play, which is the bread and butter of Florida State's offense, which is that counter run, either GT, which stands for guard or tackle, or GY, which is guard or tight end, that run. And I think you have the right kind of backs that are going to be able to make a difference in that. And so, I really think you're going to see a markable improvement with them. And then, of course, you got the freshmen. I mean, Cam Davis is built like a dadgum tank. My goodness. His forceps are bigger than my 8-ceps. I don't even know if I got 8-ceps, but they big. He's a thing. So, I think they're going to be great. I think they're going to be a really good addition to this room.
Yeah, I think it's biceps
There you go.
As a guy who works in the medical field, I should probably say that. But I think Cam Davis has stole the show this fall, and I really think that I haven't seen a running back at Florida State built like that since Greg Jones. And you remember he was just taking people's helmets off with forearms, so that's going to be excited as well. And then of course, you also have Jalen Lucas, a guy that's going to come in as kind of that all-purpose scat back. Now, he didn't do a ton at Indiana as a running back, around 250, 275 yards both years there as a running back. They had, I think, the 102nd ranked rush offense. So it really wasn't nobody doing nothing at running back at Indiana. but when you look at 2023, I think they started to figure out how to use him more correctly.
Right.
He lined up in the slot 41% of the time last year compared to only 8% the year before. And that led to him tacking on 34 receptions for 247 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I really think here, this guy he's one of those guys where, you will see him in the backfield a lot. I don't know he's going to be doing like true traditional running back duties, but if you can find a way to get him in space, this guy is dangerous. He can take it to the house. This is also a guy that I talked to some friends of mine over the summer that do a podcast that's more national talk, and they talked to a guy from Indiana who said, watch out for Jalen Lucas. This is a guy that was grossly misused at Indiana, and he is a exceptional athlete. So those are the things
my ears.
Exactly. Those are the things I like to hear. And of course, we know he'll be a big part of the special teams game as well. So, but then of course, again, you got to mention Keziah Holmes. This is still a talented guy who just hasn't really found his way onto the field yet. 29 attempts last year, 185 yards, but 6.38 yards per carry. Again, was a top 5 all-purpose back coming out of high school. 3rd year at FSU now, scout team player of the year at Penn State. It's all there for him. He's got great size and speed. I think he will find an expanded workload this year. Of course, Sam Singleton is a guy that you got to mention. Doesn't have a lot of on-field time, but has been another guy that stole the show in fall camp.
Right.
Speed. They've said he's also got a little bit of power in there too. I think he's one of the most overlooked running backs in that room, and I think he's going to do really well in this offense. And then, of course, like you said, the 2 freshmen, Cam Davis and Mekhi Danzy, the speed that Danzy has, the power that Cam Davis has. I don't know how they're going to feed all these running backs. I think that's going to be quite the challenge. But I also don't know how you're going to keep these guys off the field. I mean, I think there's going to be some situations where hopefully Florida State blows some games open so you can get these guys some playing time. But man, I mean, I think Cam Davis will be good enough to start that Charleston Southern game and maybe sit everybody else. I mean, I think these guys are that good. They're not going to be able to keep them off the field. I can't wait to see Cam Davis. I hope he lives up to the hype because boy, he's got a lot of it. That is for sure.
He's got a lot of it. Yeah.
And so the last position group we'll talk about real quick is wide receiver / tight end. I think to just nail the tight ends real quick, I think Kyle Morlock has taken a big step this year.
Yeah.
You've heard about that in camp. He's bulked up physically, which should help with his blocking, which is kind of the one aspect that you have a question mark next to from the tight end room. I mean, even if you turn to the young guys, Amari Williams, and your guy Landon Thomas, I think you have two great pass catching tight ends in the works there. I don't know how much they contribute as freshmen, but who's going to be the blocker? Big Biscuit is gone. Jaheim Bell wasn't really a blocker. Jackson West has never been healthy, so you didn't have that last year. I think if Jackson West can stay healthy, that's going to be your blocking guy. I think a bulked up Kyle Morlock will be a blocker for you. And then of course Brian Courtney's kind of come on a little bit during fall camp as well. So again, while you don't maybe have a breakout guy like a Jaheim Bell, I think you still have a very well-rounded room there. And I'm looking for Kyle Morlock to take a big step after having another year at the Power 5. I mean, that's a hard transition coming from D2 or 3 or whatever shorter college is. Even though he was an All-American there, I think it was D2. I think he will look better this year. He's had a good fall camp. Yeah. And then receiver, man. Receiver is the one position where like I had the most angst, I think. And I will say that thankfully, then maybe they knew I was about to come on here and talk about the receivers. They had a good practice. And you saw that come out of the reports that they kind of punched back against the defense, who has kind of been leaning as the winner between the two throughout fall camp. But again, I mean, you have to look at who they're going against every day in practice. For every bit I want to give this receiver room, I think you do have to take into account that what they see in practice every day is going to be better than probably 80% of the teams on their schedule outside of a Notre Dame, a Clemson, probably even Miami. I think your practice, what Azareye'h Thomas and Fentrell Cypress and all those guys, they're making life hard for these receivers. Right. Now, I'm excited and encouraged about Malik Benson, what you've heard from him. I think he's turning into the guy. I think he needs to be the guy because I think he is right now your only guy that is like can be one of the best in the conference, not the best on your team. Right. I think then after him is where things start to get a little murky. You really just need one of either Portier, Williamson, or Hakeem to step into that second role. Just one. If y'all just hug each other, morph into one, like a potato sack race or something. You know what I mean? Just give me one other good receiver. I think if you can get that from them, I think you kind of want it to be Hakeem because he has the highest ceiling. I think you expect it to be Portier or Williamson because they are the veterans, the most veteran of the group, right? You also have Deuce Spann, who's somewhere around there, an exceptional athlete, an NFL type of body, but just you got to put it together on the field. He'll be great at kickoff, but you would hope that could turn into just anything this year. Right. I just think with receiver, man, there's a lot of I hope so's. Yep. And that's what makes me nervous. Like last year, there was a lot of ups and downs with injuries in that receiver room, but there was not as many I hope this happens. Right. And so I think that's what I look at from them. I feel good about a couple of guys. I feel good about Ja'Kai in the slot. I feel good about I'm excited to see these younger guys. Of course, it sucks that you lose Destin Hill. I mean, that sucks because you were expecting that to be a nice 1-2 punch there. But again, I think you can move Jalen Lucas around. And then it's just, I think Elijah Moore is the real deal. I think LaWayne McCoy's the real deal. I think you look at, there's plenty of other teams. I think Georgia Tech was actually one last year where their leading receiver was a freshman. Look, guys have breakout seasons all the time, and there's nothing, it's not illegal in the city of Tallahassee to have a breakout season as a freshman. So if he's the best guy, put him on the field. Maybe it doesn't happen early, but over the course of the season, maybe that is your go-to guy. But, I think Mike Norvell is sold on the talent in this room. He repeated it a lot. It's just finding guys to be in those consistent roles. And so, Jaylen Brown's another guy that has a lot of speed there that hopefully they're trying to bring along. I've heard they've been coaching him hard to get him ready for the season. I just think they're looking for about 3 to 5 guys to really step into a consistent role, but the talent's there if they can put it together, and what they do will be very dependent on how DJU season looks.
Absolutely. On paper, this looks like a really great wide receiver room on paper. The problem is that paper doesn't translate to wins, right?
Yep.
Necessarily. Paper can't win a game.
Right.
As Jimbo used to say, our love coach, the helmet don't make the play, the player makes the helmet,
Exactly.
And so paper can't win the game. But the problem is that we don't have experience. Even Malik Benson, who was a top JUCO transfer to Alabama, didn't get a lot of looks his way. Obviously, the quarterback at Alabama was looking only one way most of the time, and so coming into to Florida State's offense, he is kind of seen as the number one. You're going to see Jalen Lucas, like we talked about a little bit earlier, leverage all over the field, most likely in that slot position there as well, too. We're looking for that other player to develop. Now, this is a prime opportunity for someone like Portier or Hakeem to really step into that. But, man, Mike's going to play the best player available. Yep. And so, Jesse, I'd put a couple quarters down to bet you that because that's all I got to my name, a couple quarters, to bet you that you're going to see LaWayne McCoy and Elijah Moore sooner rather than later. That's how much of an impact they've had in these fall camps. That's how much an impact they've had this summer. I'm not saying they're going to play, 40, 50 snaps a game, but I'm just saying that you're likely going to see them a lot more until these other veterans prove that they can actually step up. Like we always say, Jesse, like it's Mike Norvell's job to recruit over you. It's your job to get your position and keep your position. And so I think, with this wide receiver room, they just got to go out and show it. They got to go out and prove it. And in some ways, DJU's under the same umbrella. He's got to go out and show these people that he can be that kind of quarterback. Well, this wide receiver room has got to go out and show that they are, in fact, they will meet the standard of what the paper says they should meet.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, Mike Norvell says this is the group that he's the most excited about.
That's right.
He's probably by himself, but I'm glad somebody's excited. And it's not, it's not to say that the talent's not there. It's not to say that we're not excited about this group. It's just, I think you do have to keep in the back of your mind that they are learning, they are getting on the same page with a new quarterback. They're going against a really tough secondary in practice. I mean, the talent level in that secondary, even the young guys that they would go in a practice situation is high level stuff. So
that's right.
I think they will come along. It's just, man, I'm a little bit nervous about this receiver group. That's really my only contention with this offense. But again, I really like a couple of the guys. I think you can count on Ja'Kai. I think you can count on Malik Benson. It's just finding that 2 and that 3 guy to step up. So to round out this show, now that we've kind of talked about the personnel, let's kind of go some big picture stuff with 2024 defense, where we see it going, who you're going to face as we get ready to close the show out. So looking at last year, the defenses you faced averaged around 63rd ranked defense. That's when you average all the numbers.
Yeah.
You faced one top 25 defense scoring. These are scoring defenses because, again, remember, points matter. You can have 800 yards a game and 3 points, and you're probably still not going to win. So top 50 defenses, you faced 4 last year. This year, things get a little tougher. Your average defense ranked this year, of course, this is coming from last year. Teams are allowed to get better. They're also allowed to get worse. 59th, so a little bit higher. You got 3 top 25 defenses compared to 1, and 5 in the top 50 compared to 4 last year. So you have a little bit tougher slate this year. A couple new defensive coordinators you're going against. Looking at SMU, I do have to put an asterisk by their name. They are the 11th ranked defense in the country at 17.8 points per game. But against Power 5, that number jumps up to 28.3. We know they are a different team against Power 5, and that would have ranked them at 86. So one thing that I do think is really interesting about the layout of your schedule and the defenses on it is your offense is going to have a chance to kind of get some rhythm going here.
Right.
So when you look at those opening games, Georgia Tech last year anyway, had the 97th ranked defense. BC was 86. Memphis was 95th. Cal was 114th. And then, like we said, SMU against Power 5 would have been around the 86th ranked defense. Then you jump up to 30th with Clemson.
Yeah.
But you should have about 3 to 4 games where you have an opportunity to play some teams that didn't play a whole lot of defense last year.
Yeah.
Which I think is good because some of those teams have some really good offenses. I think that's the flip side of that argument. When you look at Georgia Tech, BC, and Memphis, have a really good offense. So your defense is going to have to come to play, but I think you probably will benefit more from having an offense with more question marks going against a little bit weaker slate of defenses. So that is what lies ahead for them. Now, just to kind of round this out, when you look at Phil, this kills me every time, dude.
His name.
Phil Steele's
There it is.
projections. There you go. His projections for the Florida State offense in 2024. Keep in mind, last year they averaged 34.6 points per game. This year he has us at 32.9 points per game. That's down about 1.7 points per game. If you look at the Jordan Travis-led offense, that's down about 4.1 points per game. Initially, I thought I didn't like it. I think it's fair when you look at some of the question marks that it's going to be a different defense, more run heavy, maybe more move the chains, not score fast type of deal. I think when you look at that's still a pretty respectable number, around 33 points a game. You know, it's just a little bit tougher slate of defenses with a little bit more unknown on your offense. Now, I guess I can agree with that. Now, where I do find a little fault with Phil's projections here, I'm looking at his pass yards per game for Florida State is around 239.2. And so DJU, last year, Florida State averaged 251.4. DJU's career average from 22 and 23 are 215 yards a game.
Right.
I don't know, man. I could see that number being, DJU's not a guy that comes out and throws for 300 yards a game. He's just not. He consistently throws for over 200, but there's a couple of stinkers in there along the way too. So I'm kind of thinking, maybe that 220, 225 range as far as passing. Where I really take a little bit of difference with Phil is on his rush yards per game. He only has us bumping up 14 yards a game to 164.3 from 150 last year. FSU's average under Mike Norvell is 186 yards a game, including last year. He's had multiple seasons over 200 yards as an offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
I think we get somewhere back around that 185, 180 to 200 yard range. I think we're more above that than the 165 for sure. And so I think when you look at the projections, man, around 33 points a game, I think we run for about 180 to 200 a game.
Yeah.
I think you'll see them come close to putting together another top 25 offense. I don't know that it'll be top 20 when, just looking at the layout of the land and kind of see how things go. But I think this offense has a lot of potential. I think it really does. I think it has a lot of playmakers. There's a lot of question marks that we're going to find out answers for really quick going into this season. But, the defense is a little bit tougher this year. But overall, man, I think this offense can be very successful. It's going to look different. And it might not score quite as much as it has the last 2 years, but because I think you're going to be more defense, run heavy, special teams as a weapon as well, type of team this year. But man, I think if you can average 33 to 34 points a game, that's going to put you where you want to be.
Yeah. I think I agree. If you're in that lower 30 range, I think you'll be right there at the end of games there. Of course, a Mike Norvell offense, they're going to be able to score. I mean, even in his first two in 2020 and 2021, when he had absolutely hot garbage of a situation, they were still able to score. I mean, they were able to score. I mean, in 2020, they were the 85th ranked scoring offense. They scored 25 points a game. In 2021, it got a little bit better. They went up to 27.6 at 74th in the country. Then, of course, obviously, we know the 2022 season. It jumped significantly all the way up, tied for 16. And then last year, it took a slight dip down to 19, but still scored 34.6 points per game. So that offense is going to score. The way Mike calls plays, he schemes them up. He's the wizard of the whiteboard, right? He's the goat of the gridiron, the sorcerer of the scoreboard, the prince of play calling. I mean, I could keep going. He's all those things and more. So he's going to be able to get the offense to score. I think, again, any significant improvement in the run game is going to eventually help the passing game, right?
Yep.
Any improvement of the run game. So last year, even though Phil still is
I told you it's harder than you think.
It's hard. Even though Phil Steele is projecting that we decrease in our run yard, I actually think we're going to see an improvement. And as long as it's better than 76 in the country, where they were at 150, as long as it's better than that, even if they're just in the top 50 in rush offense, it's going to be significant for DJU's ability to throw the ball. I do think you're not going to see as much boom and bust rates as we saw last year. We saw a lot more bust rate, I think we're going to see more boom rate, but I think overall my projection would be, Jesse, is that this is we're going to see more methodical drives instead of the big chunks of course, a Mike Norvell offense isn't a Mike Norvell offense unless they're taking shots down the field. So you're going to see plenty of shots. Whether or not we connect on those, depending on DJ's throw rate and balls like that, that we'll assess that once that kind of starts happening. But I
Yeah.
do think you're going to see more of an offense driving down the field. And that I actually think this offense, if the wide receivers step up, if the offensive line is what it says it's going to be, I actually think you're going to see a more well-rounded offense, which makes Florida State that much more dangerous.
Yeah, I agree, man. I really do think like there is potential for this to maybe DJ's not as good as we think he can be. Maybe the offensive line isn't as good as we think. Maybe the receivers don't develop like we want them to. I can certainly see all those arguments, but if they hit on these things like we think they can, I think this offense can be dangerous. I think DJ is better than people think when you put him in the right system with the right guy. So, I think where Phil, God, that name, man, Phil and Steele are two names that don't go together like Miami and ACC championships. So,
yes, or
one
Gators
more
and undefeated seasons.
Exactly. One more shot before we get out of here. So, but that's going to be it for the offensive preview. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this show. Again, I think it's going to be a great year for Florida State, and we are right around the corner from kickoff.
That's right.
So, drop a like and subscribe if you've watched this video, if you've enjoyed this content. We're getting ready to record at least 2 to 3 more shows before the Georgia Tech, probably 4 more shows before the Georgia Tech game even gets here. We'll be doing live post-game shows all season for almost every game. We'll be doing all kinds of stuff throughout the season that you're going to want to stay connected with us for. So drop a like and subscribe, rate and review on the podcast. Tell a friend about us. Hey, those guys over there planting the spear, their jokes are terrible, but we think they do a pretty good job. So tell a friend, tell a neighbor. We appreciate you guys spreading the word. Also check out plantthespear.com, our hub for everything FSU coverage that we do here. Check out Autograph, the sports app that you guys are going to need in your arsenal for the upcoming season so you can stay up to date on everybody. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one, and go Noles.
Go Noles.